This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Today's podcast is brought to you by Leverage, a new fully featured decentralized futures exchange without compromise. Are you ready to trade the future of crypto today? Well, Leverage is a DEX, so you can trade with your keys and sign orders just with one click, and Leverage is fast. Yes, indeed, Leverage is powered by Gluon, a new layer 2 solution with the scalability and speed of a centralized exchange and the super low fees of a DEX. Yes, Leverage, the new exchange that combines the best features of CeFi and DeFi, so you can trade crypto spot or crypto derivatives with up to 100x leverage while maintaining control of your assets at all times. It's like William Gibson said, the future is already here, but in this case, it's evenly distributed and completely decentralized. Go to leverage.io, and leverage is spelled Leverj.io, and trade the future of crypto today. My guest today is Edmund Lowell. Edmund is the CEO of KYC Chain and the Selfkey Network, a blockchain startup developing digital identity solutions that empower individuals to take back ownership of their identity and data. Hey, welcome to the show, Edmund.
Thank you for having me, Andy. Good to be here.
To start off with, why don't we just get a little bit of background? Love to hear a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you've been doing, and what was your first introduction to blockchain, Edmund?
Sure. So I'm originally from the United States, and I was in university. I was selling real estate as a broker to make my way through university, and I had very bad timing when I was doing that because it was 2008. And we had the global financial crisis, and the U.S. property market just absolutely tanked. So I sort of was growing up in a time where there was a lot of economic turmoil, and that's when I really started discovering about blockchain and these kind of concepts. So that was kind of in the back of my mind was that event as well as this technology. Flash forward a few years, I started a company called Flag Theory, which is still around today. I was setting up legal entities and helping those legal entities obtain a bank account. And I was always frustrated by this process called KYC, where I would collect documentation on my customer and pass it on to a bank, and then the bank would turn around and repeat the same checks that I had already done, and it would take a long time for the client to get their account open, sometimes a month in many cases. So this was kind of in the back of my mind, and in 2014, I founded a company, authored a white paper in 2015, really got the company going, called KYC Chain. So KYC Chain helps businesses and institutions gather and obtain financial information on their customers, check that information, and then give them kind of a green check mark to open up the account. However, in the course of running this business for several years, we went through 4 different accelerators. We worked with Standard Chartered Bank, a number of exchanges. We realized that even though we'd created an efficiency gain for the institution, the individual, be it a company or an individual just trying to get an account open, still had to submit their documents over and over again. And we felt like there would be a good use of blockchain in a decentralized way to make this process a bit easier. So in 2017, KYC Chain founded the Selfkey Foundation, and that was kind of our start into the business-to-consumer application with our identity wallet. So that's sort of the last 10 years of my life in a nutshell. I'm sure we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail.
Very nice, very nice. Well, let's maybe just try and articulate the problem that you're essentially building a solution to then, Edmund. So I guess, and it's quite timely because, there's a lot of discussion at the moment around personal data, right? And, the leaks that are happening, the data breaches, the hacks, and the issues that come. So, a really good recent example was, last year, of course, Ledger, who make the crypto hardware wallets, they had a breach or a leak of, I think, 1 million email addresses that were on their one of their email lists. And even more seriously than that, there was a list of, I think, around 272,000 odd individual customers. That was their customer list, and that was leaked as well. And of course, that list contained, names, phone numbers, email addresses, and physical addresses, which is, and obviously that list is a fairly attractive honeypot or high value target if you are a bad actor or you're a phishing scammer or anything like that. So I guess, yeah, well, you pick up the story. What's the sort of, what is the data problem here, and how are you looking to address it?
Sure. So we see the data problem is twofold, and really this would have prevented that ledger leak that you mentioned, which was quite unfortunate, and I feel badly for the people that were involved with that. The first problem is that there's an oversharing of data with corporations. Did Ledger really need to keep that data on file? I would argue no, they didn't. And the second issue is that there's a centralization of the data so that it's stored within these corporations in a centralized data repository that is an attractive honeypot to hackers. And what we're trying to do at Selfkey is really tackle it from a perspective of, let's minimize the amount of data that needs to be shared. And if possible, we can do things like encrypt it. And there's lots of different technologies that can kind of minimize the amount of data that's shared and do it in the safest way possible. And the second is to decentralize the way that data is shared, so it's not just sitting in singular data repository, especially one that becomes large, and then the larger it becomes, the more valuable that data becomes as well, from the perspective of a hacker. So those are kind of two of the ways that we're trying to solve the digital identity problem. And within that, because digital identity is kind of this huge, massive topic, industry, right? A lot of different sectors of the economy will have digital identity. We're specifically right now trying to target financial account opening, and we do that in two ways. We do that by making it easy to see, what are my options for setting up a bank account abroad? What are my options for obtaining a crypto loan? So helping the customer or the user from a discovery perspective, where they can discover a financial product, and then help them from the sign-up perspective. Okay, let's make it really easy for me to go through that KYC process. As I talked about kind of previously, if you're opening up a bank account, sometimes that can take 28 days. What we found is within our software, we can get that down to about 1 or 2. And this is for a corporate account opening, which oftentimes is a little bit more difficult. So I hope that answers your question. Happy to tell a bit more.
Yeah, well, so let's try and understand what Selfkey is then. So I understand that it's I guess a self-sovereign identity solution, and the idea, I presume, is that all of your the components to your identity or whatever you need for a KYC process, that is all held, I presume, in some kind of Selfkey wallet, and then the user or the owner of that wallet, you can control who gets access to those identity documents. And so that the idea would be that those documents just live inside the wallet and don't necessarily need to be held by that third party. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, effectively. The user, from their perspective, they would really only ever have to interact with the Selfkey wallet. That's the identity owner component of our network. We also have two other important players in the Selfkey network, which are certifiers, for instance, the people who are checking and verifying identity and issuing some kind of claim. It also can be called a claims issuer, or the relying parties. This would be the third party, such as the bank, the insurance company, Ledger, whoever is requesting that data. And what we envision with Selfkey is that in the future, you can share your data perhaps with a certifier who might issue something like a zero-knowledge proof or an identity credential against the documents and data that are held within your wallet. And then that could be shared with another trusted party, say a relying party, and we don't need to send a copy of your passport. We don't need to send the actual address where you reside, because we can trust kind of that cryptographic signature that's been issued by the certifier. So that's kind of an example of how Selfkey can minimize the data as well as prevent it from kind of being overshared at the same time.
The technology exists to build all of this right now. And in fact, obviously that's exactly what you're doing. And there are a number of other I guess, decentralized identity solutions building around and across the crypto ecosystem. But really, what is the next step? What needs to happen, Edmund, for these kind of systems to actually be adopted and used? Because it's one thing to build the system, but these how do you actually get the massive banks and the government departments and the institutions to really hop on board? That's going to be quite some work to do there, I imagine.
It is, and I like to answer that question very succinctly: slowly, then suddenly, right? And I think that's how all blockchain technologies are going to make their way into mainstream, right? The idea that PayPal would be allowing for Bitcoin transfers back in 2013 was almost unthinkable. And now, it's just par for the course. So I think we're going to see naturally governments and banks adopt these technologies at their own pace, as they will. I think what we really need to do at this point is get the consumer to care, right? Because the individual, you listening to the podcast, you're the person who this is truly built for. That's why I decided to do this, and why I think a lot of the other self-sovereign digital identity systems decide to do this is because it's self-sovereign. It's about the individual taking ownership of their data back from the giant corporations and back from the government. They haven't done a good job of protecting it, quite frankly, and it's much better in the hands of the individual because it's yours, it's your identity. I think that we really lose sight of that sometimes in kind of the larger financial industry, as I've kind of been operating in for a while. Companies will see data that's of their quote-unquote customers as their property. And to me, that's fundamentally wrong. This is a data issue, but it's also a human rights issue. And I think that the individual is the best owner of that data. If you think about just one more point, this is kind of one of the most important topics of our time, right? We live in an age where it's an information economy, where the largest companies in the world, the most powerful companies in the world, the Facebooks, the Googles, have come out of nowhere in the past couple of decades and built huge, massive businesses off the back of your data. It's a product oftentimes that's free, then oftentimes within that product, you're the product, right? And that's how they offer the services is kind of this cool, so-called free, but nothing's really free in this world. And many times when you're using those products, the companies are harvesting your data, aggregating that data, and then selling that data. And I think that there are many companies coming at it from different angles, and at the end of the day, we're all kind of fighting the same fight. What we need to do is we need to align on the technology and kind of the core infrastructure that's being used. And there's several working groups where lots of our competitors and us join and cooperate. Sometimes we call it cooperative because it's both cooperation and competitive. But we'll have things like, say, an identity resolver, which can resolve a DID across different blockchain networks. Or you can have an identity hub that links up to a DID, and this would also enable different self-sovereign digital identity networks built on blockchain, or even different technologies to speak to one another. So you're absolutely right to say, Andy, that the technology is here, and more than that, there's actually a great level of cooperation on an industry level. And the next step forward is really to get the consumer a bit more educated and have them, quite honestly, care a bit more about some of these issues. And that's, I think, what will take this to the mainstream.
Yeah, I think that's quite right, Edmund. And I think, I guess the sort of the events of, early January in the US, it seems like there is a gradual awareness that there is a need for decentralized protocols because, for good or bad, some of these, big, powerful tech companies have been in some ways forced to choose sides, as it were. And that has illustrated very clearly just to the average person that, if you don't really have control of the use of these kind of big centralized third-party technology companies, and the only way to really take control of your own destiny, whether it be on social media or KYC or identity or crypto. It is, a slow move towards decentralized protocols. That's kind of where the world is going to shift across the next decade, I think.
I totally agree. And I think there's a very interesting example for crypto users, which is the custodial wallet versus non-custodial wallet, right?
Yes.
You can go ahead and you can keep your crypto on a centralized exchange, but we've seen time and time again that those exchanges will lose that crypto if you keep it there for long enough, right? We had the biggest hack ever at Mt. Gox. It's almost a decade ago now. And people still will keep their coins on a centralized exchange because it's quote unquote easier. And that, I think, is the great struggle that technologists like myself and our project have to fight against, is we have to try to make it as simple and as easy as possible. But there is a little bit more work for the user to do to be an owner of their data or of their crypto. But I think for my money, I would not keep my money on a centralized exchange. I would keep it in a non-custodial wallet or a multi-signature wallet, even better in many cases, because then you can have backups and you can have fail-safes. But yeah, unless that wallet code is free and open source and non-custodial, I won't even look at it. And it just shocks me that today there are still centralized wallet solutions and still centralized exchanges that thrive when there's really a decentralized alternative that's much better. And I think we'll start to gradually see people move across as they become more educated. But it goes back to that same concept of people have to care. They have to be responsible for themselves. If they want to offload that responsibility to someone else, well, then you shouldn't be surprised when that other company lets you down, because it's really a system. If it's centralized in the decentralized space, it's kind of built to fail in many respects. And I think that some companies are better than others, but I think ultimately not your keys, not your crypto.
Yeah, that is very nicely said, Edmund. And look, I mean, speaking of the rise of decentralized protocols, obviously in 2020, DeFi, the DeFi ecosystem, mostly built on Ethereum, had a massive year and looking set to continue that trend in 2021. And as I understand it, you're building out the Selfkey ecosystem to also participate across DeFi. So maybe, just walk us through what that looks like.
Sure. So we had within the Selfkey R&D team an idea for a DeFi platform that we felt was unique and was not on the market previously. So what we did is we built out the prototype, and then we actually spun this out into its own project called KeyFi, sort of aptly named KeyFi. So key, but then also DeFi. So what makes KeyFi a bit different is, number one, it leverages identity claims, and you can use an identity claim in a DeFi system to do all types of interesting things potentially in the future, right? If you have an identity, some people might say, why would you want an identity in DeFi? And it's a fair question that needs to be answered. I think some of the advantages that it gives you is access to centralized services that are only available through centralized parties, such as Visa or MasterCard access as a kind of debit card against your balance on the KeyFi platform, right? You could have a under-collateralized loan that was attached to your digital identity. And if you had it so that you could only have one digital identity in the system at a time, and you had a Sybil attack prevention mechanism, that could be a valuable way to have an under-collateralized loan. Because right now in decentralized finance, what's available is mostly over-collateralized loans, so it's an inefficient use of capital. So having a digital identity, would allow us to potentially do a under-collateralized loan. And there's one other aspect that we think is unique, which is some level of machine learning or artificial intelligence, which is built into the platform to try to help the user pick out which might be the best option for them. So what DeFi needs, we think, is both kind of connections and bridges to centralized financial services products, a digital identity, as well as kind of an aggregation in one place. And most of the DeFi platforms that are out there right now are simply an aggregator, right? If you look at some of the most popular ones like Wire, what they do is they aggregate different contracts and consolidate those contracts into a single user interface or UI. We do the same thing. We aggregate multiple different contracts together into a consolidated UI, but we also allow you to optionally set up an identity and start building up a transactional history that you could then perhaps take a loan against. And we also have the ability for you to do some basic, at this point, machine learning on the different platforms to suggest what might be the most interesting from a rates perspective. So that's kind of what KeyFi is in a nutshell, keyfi.com. You can check it out. It's free, and yeah, I hope you like it. If you have any comments on it, we have our dedicated community for that, and we'll be happy to hear what you think.
Fantastic. And the key utility token in the Selfkey ecosystem, is that still a key component? How does that work?
It is. So all the products and services within Selfkey are paid for with key tokens. So you can't interact with the system at all, quite frankly, unless you have key. Yeah, so it's a very integral part of the system overall.
All right, very nice. Well, just as we finish off this part of the podcast, then Edmund, cast your mind forward. We've sort of talked about how there is this, growing awareness amongst just the general population, or the normies, if you like, that there may be something to this idea of decentralized, funny internet money after all, and certainly decentralized protocols where there's no third party to tell you whether you can or cannot use their platforms. But yeah, I mean, what happens next? Do you see any sort of trigger or tipping points that are really going to start to drive the use of decentralized identities?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't know for sure. It's tough to foresee the future. I'll always kind of look like a fool predicting the future, no matter what. But I do think that what will happen is that you'll have a number of different platforms starting to get traction at the same time. And that will actually help the other quote-unquote competitors in the space if it's done right. If you have a system that uses DIDs, that uses identity hubs, that is registered in the way that they do their DID method and allows competitors to have a resolver, you'll have, I think, different pockets where one company is working on this in this area, and then maybe healthcare in this specific region. Then you have another project which is working on financial services in a different region. But we'll start to see a bridge, kind of an internet, if you will, where different protocols, different platforms are interacting through the same protocol. So that's how I think this will break through, is slowly, then suddenly. And I think each one of these different projects will sort of gain critical mass at their own speed, but eventually that will be sort of to the good of everyone, and eventually, mostly to the user, because they're going to be able to have a consolidated view of their different identities and different contexts through a single identity wallet. In the background, there'll be all this complex technology powering it all, but as a user, that's sort of less important, and you just want that consolidated, nice user experience. So I think that's what we see as the short-term, medium-term future for digital identity.
Yes, indeed. It is often all about the user experience. And I guess last question then, Edmund, I understand that, the Selfkey is more for the individual, and then the KYC chain, I guess, is more for companies or enterprises, institutions. It did strike me though that KYC chain, it's a funny name for a blockchain project, but at the same time it does make perfect sense, because you couldn't really describe the project more. But yeah, why did you decide to call it KYC chain?
Funny enough, there is actually no blockchain in KYC chain at this point. When we started back in 2015, we really had a vision for making it better for the individual and for the user and for the company to be in control of that data and then give the user permission over it. And what we found is that the companies just didn't want to do that. The companies saw the information as theirs. They saw it as their intellectual property. And we really had to rethink how are we going about this from a fundamental level? So we took out any of the blockchain element and we put that into Selfkey. So companies can use Selfkey without engaging in KYC Chain. It does make it a little bit easier, but you don't need to use KYC Chain to interact with Selfkey. We've tried to abstract that and make it as widely usable as possible without any vendor lock-in. All of the source code for Selfkey, I believe, is open source. And yeah, KYC Chain, I think, is unfortunately named at this point. So we've been thinking of rebranding it, but there is sort of some brand equity that's associated there. KYC.io has been something that we've been playing around with, maybe changing it to. But to be honest with you, most of my efforts are focused on thinking about how do we make this as decentralized, as permissionless, and as open as possible, because you need those elements in order to attract the user, in order to attract the institution, and to really make identity network work. So yeah, that's I hope a good enough answer for you. We do think about that, and perhaps the name has changed. That really is just a figment of the past and based on when we started.
Fair enough, Edmund. Can't argue with that. All right, well, look, let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation Hot Take Round.
Are you ready to trade the future of crypto today? Introducing Leverage, a full-featured decentralized futures exchange without compromise. Leverage is a DEX. Trade with your keys and sign with one click. Leverage is fast. It's powered by Gluon, a layer 2 solution with the scalability and speed of a centralized exchange and the low fees of a DEX. Say goodbye to exchange hacks, front-running, Ethereum network congestion, and high gas fees. Leverage, a new exchange that combines the best features of CeFi and DeFi so you can trade crypto spot and derivatives with up to 100x leverage while maintaining control of your assets at all times. Like William Gibson said, the future is already here, but in this case, it's evenly distributed and completely decentralized. Go to www.leverj.io and trade the future of crypto today. For crypto indices and benchmarking, Brave New Coin's powerful indexing engine can calculate high-frequency intraday and end-of-day indices for a wide range of index products. Brave New Coin's custom indices team delivers experienced consultancy, premium data, and trusted calculation. Contact BNC today to find out more.
All right, we are back, and I'm with Edmund Lowell, the CEO of KYC Chain and the Selfkey network, a blockchain startup empowering individuals to take back ownership of their identity data. And look, Edmund, I like to finish each show with a quick round of rapid fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Let's do it.
All right, so I just want your hot takes, your hot fire, just rapid quick fire answers off the top of your head. Here we go. Edmund, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think that Ethereum just does some amazing things with its EVM that can't be done with opcodes. So I'm going to have to say I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that's kind of where I stand.
Very nice. Okay, well, what would you say, though, Edmund? What is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
My firmest conviction, not your keys, not your crypto.
I love it. Very good. Very good. Edmund, Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. Whatever you like, you know, blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or decentralized identities, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
Well, I said earlier, I'll always look like a fool predicting the future, but I'll say that we'll have gone a bit more mainstream. I definitely foresee central bank digital currencies launched. I think some of them will be launched on Ethereum. We'll continue to see the space move at a rapid pace and evolve. It'll probably look like the internet looked in 2001, 2000 right now. And then if you look at 2008, 2009, there were still these mainstay companies that had stuck around, had made it through kind of the decline, the trove disillusionment, and the hype cycle curve, they call it. And I think we'll see many companies that have died, and we'll see several projects that are just household names that are what people use to transact in their day-to-day lives. So I think we'll probably see this follow the trend of the internet to some respects.
Yes, very nice. Okay, well, Edmund William Gibson, a famous sci-fi author, he said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's probably a lot of people in the world that don't know about blockchain or digital currencies. And there's some companies that operate autonomously only with crypto, right? I can think of open source projects or blockchain projects that they pay suppliers in crypto, they pay their customers, well, they receive money from their customers in crypto. They operate completely within this blockchain space. Yet there's other people who don't even know really that this exists. So I think within this financial ecosystem, you sort of have started to see two different markets emerge, especially in 2017. It was just very difficult to get a bank account open for a crypto company. If you said that, the banks didn't want to touch you. It was kind of two different sectors of the economy, given that crypto is much, much smaller, of course, but there were two different sectors. And now I think what you're starting to see is more institutional adoption. You're starting to have PayPal allow for crypto within their application. That was almost unthinkable 10 years ago, right? And that's, I think, one area that we've seen move quickly, but we're still so far away from mainstream adoption. It probably feels normal to the people listening to this podcast because they're listening to Brave New Coin, right? They're obviously somewhat educated. But think about your grandma, or think about your cousin that doesn't really want to mess with that computer stuff, right? You're already living in sort of the future, and a lot of people around you may not know it. They may think that Bitcoin's a scam, or Bitcoin is this or that. All of the popular arguments that are made by the mainstream media anytime the price drops by 10%. And if you've been in this for more than one bull run, you know that a 10% drop is just nothing. You probably have weathered some 30 or 40% drops, and Bitcoin will quote unquote die again, right? We're gonna see we're going to see a dump in Bitcoin and many cryptocurrencies, but the technology will be here to stay in many cases, and I think we'll continue to really enter into many different aspects of society.
Yes, indeed. Very nicely said again. All right, well, look, time to get a little bit weird, Edmund. Let's zoom out. What do you see as a long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think the big question really is, can we make it past being a single planetary species, right? That's the question. Do we die on Earth, or do we make it to another planet? And right now, I gotta say I'm a little bit pessimistic, because I see probably just a handful of people trying to get to Mars. And let's face it, Mars is kind of like just the beta test. It's just the proof of concept. It's like, can we make it just right there? Mars is so close on a galaxy level. It's not even funny. It's like walking to your bathroom and back to your bed in terms of like how big not only our solar system but the galaxy is. It's just unbelievable. But there are inhabitable planets out there, and it is conceivable that the human race would make it to inhabit some of them at some point. We would obviously need a massive breakthrough in technology, but yeah, things like Moore's Law and who knows what type of other events could happen that enable that technology breakthrough to happen. I think that's possible. So I'm hopeful, yet I don't know, a bit pessimistic that we'll make it past one planet. Because on the other hand, you have a lot of pollution, you have a lot of people, you have a lot of bickering about stuff that quite frankly doesn't matter, when we could be kind of a little bit more organized as a human race into kind of a cohesive mission to go beyond ourselves. So I don't know, Andy, let's see what happens.
we'll have to see what happens indeed. It'd be nice if we could, and I think we will get to Mars during yours and my lifetimes. That seems to be on the cards, mainly thanks to Mr. Elon Musk. But you're quite right, Mars is really just a hop, step and a jump from our existing cosmic doorstep, and one day we will indeed go much further and farther, but that will happen on a long time frame if something doesn't go wrong in the meantime. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Finally, Edmund, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
Oh, good question. I'm gonna have to say one that I watched very recently, which is The Matrix.
The Matrix is an excellent choice. When people ask me that question, they like to flip it back on me every now and again, and The Matrix is my go-to answer because it is a superb piece of science fiction filmmaking.
So far ahead of its time. I mean, when Matrix 1 came out, wow, the world was really a different place than today. The movie almost rings more true now than it did at the time. And I don't know, for me personally, that was just kind of a transformative movie in my youth, watching that and kind of thinking about some of those concepts. And I'm for sure, I've taken the red pill and there's no going back.
Exactly right. Awesome. Hey, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking to you today, Edmund. Nothing else to say really except to hand the microphone back to you and say, take us out. Tell the people where they should go if they want to dive into the Selfkey network and get involved and find out more about the different solutions that you're building. Where should they go? What should they do?
Sure. So selfkey.org is the place to go. That's where you can download the wallet for free. You can open it up. You can check out the marketplace and explore the products and services. You don't have to put in any information, but if you do put in information, it's not going to us. It's sitting locally in your wallet. And then when and if you choose, you can sign up for different products and services. I just want to say thank you all for listening, and to the moon. Or to Mars, awesome. I guess we should say.
To Mars, to the moon and to Mars. Excellent. Couldn't have said it better. Thanks very much, Edmund. Bye for now.
Thank you, Andy. Bye-bye.
All right. That's us. We are out of here. Don't forget, if you did enjoy the show, please do feel free to give us a 5-star rating and even a nice review in Apple iTunes or the Apple Podcasts app. Would certainly appreciate that. Bye for now. See you real soon. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave and You.